gonna sneak in.
You might check it.
Oh, okay. Another chair up? Yeah. That's for Tommy.
That is His Holiness chair over there. See, it's different. It's not a usual chair.
It's a throne.
They're fighting for the next year.
Oh, sorry. So, you're going to do lay down a search?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Gonna lay down my sword shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study well no more. Ain't gonna study well no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study well no more. Ain't gonna study well no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Gonna walk down that road of peace, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna walk down that road of peace, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Ain't gonna study war no more.
Good to have Celeste back from overseas. And when I was having dinner tonight, when I sat down, I heard the phrase Ya Allah. Is that how you said it?
Yalla.
Ya Allah. She said Ya Allah, and I said, and that was when I sat down. Have any of you ever sat down and someone said Ya Allah to you?
It's very common in Farsi.
I know. I didn't know that. I know now. It's very common. And so it's a very nice way to say, you know, have a seat. So I said, what does it mean? And so then two Persians were at the table, and they, as is common when you have two Persians, they totally disagreed with what it actually meant.
Different meanings.
And they said different meanings. But I think the meaning is, oh God, Yah meaning oh, and God meaning Allah. And I think the other Persian, who I'm not going to mention any names, but the other Persian, his initials are Sohail Mansour, he thought it meant, what did he think it meant?
Move on, get going.
He thought it meant get out of here and move on or get going.
Yalla.
So,
A different place, the same thing,
Right.
but it depends.
Yeah, so there's two meanings.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was saying.
That's it. Yeah.
I have verification
Same or
here.
two different things.
oh, okay. So, anyway, so it made me think about how in English we have many words also that have God built into it, but because we've used them so much for so long, we forget that God is involved in it. For example, you say goodbye. Yeah, that really means, goodbye. But it actually originally meant God be with you. So when you go, you say God be with you, and that slowly became goodbye. And many other words, we say Gesundheit or something, that means God bless you in German, when someone sneezes, because in the old days, if you sneezed, you were probably going to die of the plague, so they would die and so on. And I said that many words that come from Greek or Latin origin have the word theo built into them. For example, the word enthusiasm or enthuse means God within. That's the original meaning of it. When you say someone has enthusiasm, it actually means they have God within, because theo, anything that has the thing actually means God. So it made me think, as we were having dinner, how God played a role in our lives to a very significant extent during the history of mankind. And at this day and age, we forget how much God is, because we just kind of, we say these words and we don't even realize that God is part of these words anymore. There's a particular word that Persians used to say to me, which was inshallah. And I always thought, when I first saw the way Persians used the word inshallah, it meant no. Because anytime I asked the Persians if they would come to something or would they be there next week, they would say inshallah, and then they wouldn't be there. So I just assumed that the word inshallah meant no. Later on, I was told that it means God willing. And so I realized that when the Persians are going to definitely be somewhere, they say, yes, I'm going to be there. But if they're not going to be there, they blame it on God. and they say, inshallah. And so, because I observed the use of the word rather than the original meaning, I realized, am I speaking the truth?
Yes, you know too much about Persian culture.
So, we were just having a fun conversation, and then we started talking about other words and so on, and it just made me realize that when I pick up the Old Testament, I find that God was everywhere and doing everything and interacting with people. Did you notice that? God is like, he's going to these people and he's raising them up, and these people he's smiting them down, and God's always got a hand and a finger in everything when you read the Old Testament. And it seems also when you read the Greek literature or the Egyptian, that they have a feeling that God is present, he's active, he's doing something in their lives. Today we don't have such a feeling that God is around. Even though it's embedded in our language, these words have the word God. We say them and God does not, it doesn't even occur to us. When we say goodbye, the word God doesn't even occur to us. And so it made me think that we're living in a world that's largely forgot God. That's what it made me think we'd have dinner, as I had dinner tonight. So I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I was going to talk about something else anyway, and I'm going to talk about that something else. But I thought this is a very good way to look at it, because everybody needs to know what their real purpose is. I remember there was an old friend of mine. He used to often say, what if you went to someone's house and you opened the refrigerator and they had all their shoes in the refrigerator? You open it and all their shoes were stored in the refrigerator. What would you think?
Crazy.
You think it's crazy. Because you would say, don't you know what the purpose of a refrigerator is? What is, the purpose of a refrigerator? But if you think about it, a refrigerator is probably a good place to store shoes, because it can do it. Would you agree? It's a good storage and stuff like that. It's just that that's not what the refrigerator was created for. The refrigerator wasn't created to store shoes, although it can be used to do so. And so he used to say that we are like that too. There are many things that we can do, but we were created to do certain things. And so this is the analogy he used. And it was pretty stupid, but he always used to do it. And I always thought of opening the fridge and seeing all the shoes and so on. So it stuck with me as an image. But today, there's a lot of us are like refrigerators full of shoes. We have the ability to do something. We were created to do something. And we're not doing that, and we're able to do other things. Now, I'd like to say to you that the main thing that you were created to do was to know God. First thing is to know God. So actually, let me get my notes, because I brought up one of the talks I gave on God. Because we haven't talked about, have we talked about God? No. Have I ever actually had an actual session on God?
No.
Isn't that kind of weird, that we're talking about spirituality all this time? I never mentioned God.
I was in China, I don't know.
What, in China you were in China? Okay. Okay. Well, this is a very interesting thing. The whole theory of the science of spirituality is that the physical world is a representation of the spiritual world. Isn't that right? Isn't that what we've been talking about? So truth is expressed in this physical world, and it's also part of the spiritual world. There are just two ways of expressing the same truth. In fact, in one of the passages it said there are two books, the book of creation and the book of revelation. In other words, the book of creation is the world. Everything you see, those mountains and the trees and water, that's the book of creation. And the other is the book of Revelation, which God gives through the Bible and the Quran and the Old Testament and so on. And he says that both books are the same. They're just two different languages speaking the same truth. The book of, and so this is the whole science of spirituality that I'm trying to talk about. And it seems to me that if you look at the way in which life is sustained in physical creation, the principles of life, you can look at the principles of life in spiritual creation, and they're both the same. This is why Jesus used so many analogies of seeds and growth and going into the womb and being born again and so on. That all of spiritual truth can be explained by looking at... is that my phone back there? Oh, don't worry.
That's your phone.
It's okay, I don't want it. I don't want it. It's probably God calling. No, don't get it. I don't want it.
I want to close the door.
Yes. So, I want to first of all talk about to know God. How does someone know God? Let's just say that you were to accept my premise that a refrigerator was created to keep things cold. Okay? How many of you accept that as a premise? That's why it was created. Okay. So now let's say I tell you, you were created to know God. Now, if you accept that, what's the first question you're going to say?
How will I know?
How? Wouldn't you agree? In the same way you could say, if no one ever knew about a refrigerator, you'd say, well, how does it keep things cold? Isn't that right? So how do you know God? And actually, there's one prayer that I read. It says, Thou hast created me to know Thee and to worship Thee. To know Thee and to worship Thee. Now we got two things. First, you've got to know God, and you've got to worship Him. And in many other passages, it says you need to know God and to love God, which, of course, is in Christianity. To love God is the main thing. So these are the things you were created to do. And so your first question is, how do you know God? And I'd like to say this. You cannot love God until you know God. I want to get that really clear. You can't love God until you know God. If someone says you got to love God, or some people say for the love of God, and actually they mean the quite opposite. You can't love God until you know Him. And there's an old song which you should learn to sing by Connie Francis, or to know Him is to love Him. Does anyone know that song?
Yeah.
Well, how's it go? Yes. Yeah, to know Him is to love Him. I don't know the rest of it, because it's pretty corny. What is it?
And I do.
And I do. Everything's repeated in 3. And it's a very deeply spiritual song. Of course, the song is not about God. The song is about her lover. But she's making a very important principle. She says to know Him is to love Him. Because you only can love somebody if you know them. And this is true in life. And the more you get to know a person, the more you deeply love them. If you just kind of love them on the surface and you don't know them very well, that love can easily fade very quickly. And it does. I'm sure you've experienced that as well. But when you know someone really well, that is the real form of loving him. So this is a very important principle that we can learn in life, that to know somebody really well is the only way you can truly love them. So we need to know God. Now, how do we know God? That's the question you just told me. How does one know God? Who wants to tell me how you know God?
Through His creation.
Through His creation? Okay. Explain, keep going.
Through the manifestation?
Through like the prophets? Okay, who else wants to give me?
If you love somebody, you want to spend time with them.
Okay.
So spending time with them
is how you can know them. In other words, you can't know somebody if you ignore them and spend no time with them. That's what you're saying. Okay, so spend time with God. How do you do that?
Pray.
I'm sorry?
Prayer.
Oh, prayer? Will that help you to know God?
Feel Him.
You feel Him? How do you feel Him?
You feel good.
You feel good, okay. I'm just asking you, because I'm gonna try and answer this question right here.
The only thing with that, though, is prayer comes from the manifestations in general.
Not in all religions. In fact, you're talking from a Baha'i perspective, but many religions have very few prayers in which the messenger revealed the prayers. The Quran has a few. The Bible really has just one. Of course, the Old Testament has several. But one can also pray directly from themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, like, does the act of prayer come... I mean, I would imagine like, a lot of us pray, I know, because it says to in the religion.
Okay. Well, let's come back to this, okay, because what you're actually saying is leading to what I want to say. Does anyone have any other ideas? Because I just want to mention something, and then I'm going to talk about who God is. Who God really is.
Read the scriptures.
I'm sorry?
Read the scriptures.
Reading scriptures, reading the Bible or the Quran. Yes? Okay. Will that help you to know God?
Sure.
How many people think that'll help you to know God? Okay. I want to read something here. And it says here, to every discerning and illumined heart, it is evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporal existence, ascent, descent, egress, and regress. So basically what he's saying here is that anybody that really thinks about it has to realize that God is completely unknowable. And he cannot be confined by any human limitation. And he talks about cause and effect, egress and regress, or descent, or time, or anything. He can't be bound by this, because if God does exist, if you're not sure he exists, and if he created everything, the difference between the created and the creator has to be, just by definition, immense. If you look at a painting on the wall, you know that somebody painted that. How could the painting ever know the painter? It's almost inconceivable if you just meditate. Even if you look at a watch and you say, how could the watch know the watchmaker? Or whatever. If you think of anything that's created, you think, how can it possibly know the creator? And so what he's saying here is, he said, it's completely obvious that if you meditate on if God does exist, he would be completely unknowable. It says, far be it from his glory that human tongue could adequately recount his praise, or that human heart comprehend his fathomless mystery. He is, and hath ever been, veiled in the ancient eternity of his essence, and will remain in his reality everlastingly hidden from the sight of men. Then he quotes from the Quran. He says, no vision taketh in him, but he taketh in all vision. So it's saying that no vision takes God in, and God visions all things. So now we're in deep trouble, because I just said the purpose of life, your purpose as a soul, is to know God. And now I just read a passage which says God is unknowable. How do you like that? Isn't that kind of strange? It's very strange. So then he goes on to explain, and this is what you were getting at, is that God then decided. When I say then decided, of course the word then can't apply to God, because it's a word that has to do with time. He just decided. There is no time, because we're just told that time doesn't bound God. But God decided, whenever, that out of love he wanted to have a creation. So he made a creation, but then he had to make a means whereby he could make himself known to creation. There has to be some way that he can make himself known. It would be as if I painted that painting, and now I want to somehow enable that painting to know me. How could I do that? What is the first thing I would have to do to make that painting know me?
Write your name in the corner.
The painting would have to
Come alive.
be sentient in some
You
way.
got it. He got it. I have to make the painting come alive.
Gotta come alive.
I have to make the... Does that make sense? He hit the nail on the head. This is the deepest concept you can think of. When
I've
something...
never done that in my life.
I'm sorry?
I've never had a deep concept like that.
Well, but you paint, right?
Yes.
And actually there are many pieces of literature throughout history in which the creator tried to make his creation come alive. Have you read Pirandello's 6 Characters in Search of an Author?
Frankenstein.
Well, it's a deep spiritual concept that the Creator makes something and then has to make it come alive so it can know it. And it has something deeply to do with the bond of love. Now, we are told that God does this through manifesting himself. Somehow he's able to manifest himself to human beings. But he can't manifest himself in entirety. In the same way that, for example, the sun, we know the sun, but do we really know the sun, or do we know the emanations from the sun? Can you go to the sun and stand on it or get anywhere near it? It's so far away, it's unbelievably far away. But the rays of the sun we can know. It's not the whole sun, but it's something that comes to us from the sun. And so we're told a very interesting thing, that God created creation by manifesting himself. The act of the manifestation caused creation to come into existence, to come alive, to make the painting alive, so to speak. And he does that by manifesting himself, and he does that by somehow emanating himself through a being which is not like you and me. It's not like all of us here in the room. It's a being that we sometimes call a prophet, we sometimes call a messenger, we might call it a manifestation of God. It is some being that somehow comes to us, and it is the door between the inaccessible and us. The unseen cannot be seen. Through the manifestation of God, the beauty of the unseen is seen. That's how you see it. He's not there. It's like there's a whole... I always think of the world as a creation as a figure 8. A figure 8, there's an area here, an area here, and if you look at a figure 8, the 2 areas do not intersect at all. Isn't that right? They have no intersection. The bottom of the 8 and the top of the 8 are 2, and they don't intersect. And at that very point of intersection is where I believe God places the manifestation of God. He's up there, inaccessible, and it's through that point. And we are told that these manifestations of God, who are Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and Krishna and Abraham, and there have been many throughout history, these manifestations of God have been the sole means by which all humanity has known God throughout the ages. So all of these words that we said about God be with you or inshallah and stuff, they came from cultures in which people knew God. And we are told that all cultures and civilizations, even ones that we don't know the exact history, say the ancient Egyptians or Aboriginal cultures and so on, all of them have had manifestations of God. In other words, God has never left man alone. This is the ancient promise that you read in the Old Testament, that God said to Abraham he would never leave man alone. He would always be there to guide man. And if you look at history, you can find that these great messengers, you might call the manifestations, have appeared in the world approximately every 1,000 years or so, give or take a few hundred years or something, but approximately this period of time. And humanity has tremendously progressed by the appearance of these messengers. There's not a single religion that did not come into the world and bring great progress and growth to the world. There are 3 different analogies that I read in the Baha'i writings about these divine messengers, about Jesus and Muhammad. The 3 analogies, the first one that I read quite a lot is the analogy of a mirror. He says that the divine messengers of God are mirrors of God, but they're perfect mirrors. And he says that if you look into a perfect mirror, let's say the sun is here, and you look into a perfect mirror and look at the sun, when you look at it, to all intents and purposes, you're looking at the sun. Would you agree? If it's a perfect mirror. In essence, it's not the sun, but you can see the sun in the mirror. But the sun is far away and it's not there. And that's one analogy. And so many times you'll find that they refer to this messenger of God as the mirror. Now, if you have your back completely to the sun, and you can't see the sun, but there's a mirror there, and that's the only way you can see the sun, how valuable is the mirror? And this is why he often uses the analogy that the messenger of God, the manifestation of God, is like the mirror. You turn to the mirror, and in the mirror you see God. And so it's entirely correct to say Jesus is God in one sense. And it's entirely incorrect to say Jesus is God in a different sense. Do you understand what we're talking about? Now this divided the Christian church in the first century. You know, you had some people, they said, well, Jesus is God incarnate, and some people said that that Jesus is not God, he's just from God, and they could find scriptures for both. You know, there are some scriptures that seem to imply that he is God. There's others where Jesus said, why callest thou me good? There is but one good, and it is the God which is in heaven, and so on. And all Jesus was trying to explain is the concept that the messenger of God is a perfect reflection of God. So you are seeing God in Jesus, but that God is even higher. God is even higher. So the mirror is one analogy. Another analogy that we're given quite often is the analogy of the day star. And I find this all over the Baha'i writings, that they refer to a manifestation of God, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and so on, as a day star. Does anyone know what a day star is? I want to get this clear before we do it. No one knows what a day star is? Well, that's good, because everybody knew what a day star was for 6,000 years until fairly recently. A day star is a particularly lit star that shows up just before dawn, 20 minutes before dawn, on the eastern horizon. Okay, now do you know why that happens on the eastern horizon just before dawn? Let's think about it. Here's the Earth, and the sun is moving. Okay, actually the Earth is moving, but let's not get into that, okay? So here's the Earth, and here's the eastern side. The sun is down here, and just before dawn, it's the darkest. We set your alarm clock tonight to half an hour before dawn, and you'll find it's darker than any time at night, because the moon is gone and everything. So it's really, really dark. And then suddenly on the eastern, the sun is down here, and it hasn't peaked at all, so there's absolutely no dawn. And at this point, if there's anything in the sky on this side, suddenly it goes bright, because the sun comes around and hits that. Do you understand? It's in a position where it can get the light of the sun before the rest of the Earth can get. The day star is the brightest thing that you can ever see in the sky except for the moon. And 80% of the time it's the planet Venus, which means it's not really a star. They didn't know that in those days. But because Venus hangs around that area quite a lot of the time, about 8% of the time, it goes there. So wake up in the morning and half an hour before dawn, you'll see that. Now, in the old days, the day star was extremely valuable when they didn't have all kinds of other scientific equipment, because it's totally dark, and now you know where east is. You didn't know where east was, and now, oh, east is there. Furthermore, the day star tells you that within a half an hour or so, the sun is coming. So the day star has two very interesting things that were known to all mankind. Number one is, it enables you to see the light of something that is inaccessible. The sun is completely inaccessible, but the day star gives you the light of an inaccessible thing. And this is what the messenger of God does. He brings inaccessibility to you. Secondly, it proclaims the nearness of the sun. The nearness of the sun. It proclaims it. So for this reason, the day star has been used. And you'll see this, if any of you are Baha'is, you'll see the term day star used over and over again. It's good to know that analogy. So now we know that a messenger of God, he shows us something that we cannot see. Sometimes he'll also use the moon to refer to God, because the moon also is an interesting thing. When it's nighttime, can you see any part of the sun? Can you see any part of the sun? And when you look up and you say, look at the moonlight, are you speaking correctly?
No.
Because the moon doesn't have any light. The moon is a hunk of rock. When you actually see the moon, you're saying, look at the sunlight. But of course we don't say that. And don't tell somebody that when they say the moonlight, say, well, it's not the moonlight. Okay, but that's the truth. The moon happens to be in a position where it can show us the unseen. The inaccessible can be shown. So the moon is also another symbol for that. Another symbol, which you'll see over and over again, referring to the messengers of God, is the tree. Often a tree is used, the tree of life, the divine love tree, the tree beyond which there is no passing. I don't know if you've heard some of these terms. And all the religions of God, Buddhism, Hinduism, they refer to a messenger of God as a tree. And a tree is also something that brings forth something that is inaccessible without the tree. For example, there's one statement that says, he is the tree of life that bringeth forth the fruits of God, referring to a messenger of God. Now, think about a fruit. go to the soil and try to eat the soil. Try to eat soil. Are you going to get anything from it?
Not really.
See?
No, you can't. In fact, scientifically, you can't assimilate the minerals in soil. They're the wrong electric polarity. I don't know if you understand this. So you can't get anything from the soil. The tree is a medium, whereby it takes the soil and turns it into something that you can use. It takes the inaccessible and makes it accessible. But in the act of making it accessible, it makes it beautiful, it makes it fragrant, it makes it tasty, it makes it nourishing. So it takes something, and so a tree has always been the symbol for the messenger of God. And sometimes they refer to him as the tree beyond which there is no passing, which in Persian, am I correct, Farzin, Sadratul Muntaha?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, which means the tree beyond which there is no passing. In other words, it's the highest tree. It's that you can't, you go beyond that. And so these analogies, the referring to the messenger of God as a tree, referring to the messenger of God as the sun, the God as the sun, the messenger of God as a reflection of the sun. What was the first one? Or as a mirror.
Yeah.
These are all ways of understanding how to know God. And so if you really want to know God, the best way is to get to know Jesus, is to get to know Muhammad, is to get to know, in our faith, Baha'u'llah is the founder of our faith, or Moses, or Abraham, and so on, because this will bring you closer to God. It's not that they are God. They are only a path to the one. There's only one God, and there are many paths to God, and they are not God in themselves. We don't worship anything but God. But in the same way that we say this is the moon, but it's really giving us the light of the sun. It's not giving us the light of the moon. The moon is a hunk of rock. So that's the first thing. So I wrote down what it is about the sun that is so interesting to life on earth. Because if God is the sun, we can study the sun-earth relationship and see what it is. And that same relationship holds true with our relationship to God. What is the relationship of the sun to the earth?
Life.
Oh, let's read a few. I'll read a few here. First of all, the earth gets certain things from the sun. What does it get from the sun?
Radiation.
Okay, it gets radiation. What comes through that radiation?
Heat.
Heat, and what else?
Light.
Heat and light. And various other forms
Color.
of electromagnetic radiation. Exactly. All of the spectrum of the electromagnetic. So we get heat, we get light. You're exactly right. We get color because color is part of light. That's right. Now, what would happen if we had no sun?
It'd be pretty cold.
Pretty cold? It would be what's called absolute zero. We don't even know. No one's ever been able to create absolute zero on Earth.
Well, there you go. It'd be pretty cool.
Scientists would like that term, pretty cold. Everything would die instantly. There's not a single thing that does not get its life from the sun. Even if it lives in the caves or deep below the ocean, if you analyze it, everything gets its life from the sun. The sun sustains everything. Abdu'l-Baha one time said that people that don't believe in God are like plants in the shade. They're still getting their entire life from the sun. They're still getting it from the sun. The earth wouldn't be warm, it wouldn't have oxygen, there wouldn't be air. But they're in the shade, so they can't directly see God. But he says that's all people that don't believe in God. They're just plants in the shade. They're still getting all their life from that. So the first thing we know is that the earth gets from the sun its heat, its light, its color. Everything would die without it. What are some other principles about the sun in relation to the earth?
The earth is caught in the sun's gravitational field.
Okay.
So they go around it.
Okay, so the earth and the sun have a gravitational relationship to each other. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. And everybody knows that gravity is a mutual force. It's not that the sun is holding the earth or the earth is holding the sun. They're both clinging to each other. Of course, the larger a body is, the more force it attracts. But so we can see from these things some various principles. One is that without God we would be dead. Oh, would you like to accept that? Okay. God is the source of light and life to us. we have to both gravitate towards God as God is pulling us towards Him. I'm just taking all of these basic physical principles from the book of creation and applying them to the book of Revelation. What's another principle about God in relation to the earth? Oh, by the way, number 3 I wrote here, the sun holds the earth in orbit around it. What would happen if we lost that force of gravity? What would happen to the earth? It would go spinning off into wherever, wouldn't it? It'd go really spinning fast, by the way, if it ever stopped. In other words, if the sun ceased to exist tomorrow, the earth would just go, just like that. So it's a good thing we have the gravity. It's a good thing we have the light. It's a good thing we have the heat. It's a good thing we have the gravity. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. What else? What about the earth in relation to the sun? What does the earth do with the sun?
Oh, it goes around it.
Okay, well, I got that too. It orbits it, yes. It goes in cycles.
Photosynthesis.
Well, let's take this more clearly. The sun sends electromagnetic rays, as you say, which brings heat and radiation and color and light. The earth grabs it and holds it. This is very important because many planets don't do that. I don't know if you know that. Many planets in our solar system, some of them used to do it and they don't do it anymore, and some of them may do it in the future. But right now, Earth takes it and holds the heat. The Earth inside is almost as hot as the sun at its core because it takes the heat. Now, the Earth takes it and stores it in a thing called the atmosphere. And how many of you know what the atmosphere is? What is the atmosphere?
Thin layer of...
It is so thin that you can't even compare it to the skin on an apple in relation to the earth. It would be 1/1000th times thinner than the skin on an apple. Okay, it's just a very, very small part around it. And what happens is that the earth takes that heat of the sun and holds it within this tiny little atmosphere. And it's only in that skin of the apple that we can live. Just go a little above the skin of the apple and below, and you're totally dead. Did you know that? You're totally dead. Don't just try it. You can't do it. And so the earth takes the heat of the sun, stores it, and uses it. Okay, so I'm just going to read all these things. I just got these. I looked in a book and said, what is the earth and the sun relationship? It says, number 1, it says the earth gets its heat and light from the sun. Without it, the sun, everything would die. The sun holds Earth in its orbit around it, otherwise it would go spinning off. Earth has a fire inside it, just like the sun. Is that interesting? Inside the Earth, at the very core of the Earth, it's almost just like the sun. This is just like you and me, our relationship to God. We have a fire inside of us, as hot as God. Isn't that interesting that the earth and the sun have the same relationship as man has to God?
It says we have been created in His own image.
Exactly. And the earth is like an eternal sun. The earth also has its own magnetic field, but I'm not going to go. It says earth holds in the sun's heat through the atmosphere. Number 6, earth gives off heat and gravity. It is like a mini sun. We actually are a mini sun. In fact, if you could stand on the moon, the earth would shine. I mean, actually, earth light is much stronger than moonlight. If you're on the moon, earth light is much stronger than if you're on the earth and moonlight. Do you understand why?
No.
It's big.
Because we're much bigger.
Oh.
And if you're on the moon here, and the sun is down here, and the earth is up here, that earth light's going to really light up your sky. In fact, this is a very interesting thing, because for 20 or 30 years, everyone said that they didn't go to the moon, it was all a fake. Have you ever heard people say that?
Yeah.
And they said,
fake.
sorry? I'm sorry?
What's a fake?
Okay. Some people still say that. Okay. But the point is that the main thing was they said, how come there are shadows at night in these photographs? Okay, they said, how come there are shadows at night in these photographs? So they did many scientific models, and they found that earth light is always going to create shadows on the moon. Okay, because earth light is so strong. Do you understand? So, and if you really believe it, do you think it's a fake or not?
Well, it was done in what, Brownsville, Texas, something?
Yeah, I think it was done too. But anyway, the point was is that it could have been a fake. Okay, I'm not getting into that. But the point was is that we learned by exploring this issue, we realized that the Earth does give off an enormous amount of reflection. This is the same relationship that we have to God. That we have a God within us. We take the heat of God. It stores within us, and we also give it out and we reflect. And this is why it's said in the Bible that we are created in God's image. Second, Earth has a cyclical relationship with the sun. Do you understand this? Earth has a cyclical relationship with the sun. In other words, there is a cycle in which we are at certain closeness or distance from the sun. Would you all agree? We have a cyclical relationship with the sun. Many different cycles exist. There's one cycle that is 365 days. And so you have the summer, the winter, the spring, and different things happen, and the Earth orbit is in an ellipsis and so on. And there are other cycles that are bigger, because the sun within itself is in a solar system, which is in a cycle, which in itself is a cycle, and so on. This is how the Mayans get a calendar that's 26,000 years, because they're looking at a larger cycle within the sky, which can be marked just the same. They call it the precessional cycle. Did anyone understand what that is?
No.
Okay, doesn't matter. But, okay, I'll tell you what it is. Okay, if you go at dawn, exactly at dawn on one of the solstices, because you know how the sun gets further and further away and then closer and closer and closer? So there's 2 times of year in which the sun is exactly equal. They call it the equinox, where the day and night are equal equinox, equal night. And that is approximately, what, March 21st, and what is the other
December
day?
21st.
December 21st, approximately, give or take a few hours. So those 2 times of year, if you go to the sun exactly dawn on March 21st, the sun rises in a very particular spot. And every ancient culture knew that day and that spot, and they marked it. There's not a single culture, ancient, that doesn't have some kind of buildings made out of stone in which only at that day is it lined up in the center. Have you ever seen Stonehenge? If you go at dawn at Stonehenge on March 21st, and you're like, all the other days of the year, the sun, like there's 2 pillars and the sun is there, but at dawn it just comes right up in there. Okay, and you can go to the temple at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and you can sit there, and then near the Ganges in India they have one, and so on. Because the ancients, they really wanted to know when to plant their seeds. And so they built these structures to mark that time. Because they knew that now I can start planting my seeds. Because otherwise, if you don't have a calendar and you don't know what it is, you might plant your seeds too early and they all die. Or if you don't plant them soon enough, then you're not going to have food, and it's important to get it right. So they did that. So then they noticed that exactly at that point, the stars would be in a certain configuration, okay, that night or whatever, and they noticed that they moved. Somehow, I don't know how they figured it out, that they kept moving, and every 26,000 years they came back to the same place. Now, how did they figure that one out? Okay, do you understand? And yet all the ancient cultures knew it. In fact, it moves 1 degree, a degree being 1/360th of a circle. Okay, so a degree is 1/6 of 1 second on a clock. So look at a clock and see 1 second. Divide that by 6. That's a degree. You know, because you're an architect. It's not easy to see a degree. Would you agree?
Not easy.
Would you agree? Would you agree? Okay, it's not easy. Okay, so these stars move 1 degree every 72 years. Okay, so how did the ancients, you have to live 70, you have to be like a baby, like 5 years old, and then you have to be 70 to even see that 1 degree. But they all figured out. The Mayans got it right, the Egyptians got it right, the ancient Indians got it right, and so on. So we always knew that the Earth has a cyclical relationship with the sun. And this is the same way in which the messengers of God relate to civilization, to mankind. They have a cyclical relationship. They go through a period in which there's a springtime and they arise, and there's a beautiful culture that grows, and there's a summer, and there's a golden age, and then there's kind of like a decline, and then it goes into a winter, and then as soon as you go into the winter, then then a messenger of God appears again. And this has been going on, the cyclical relationship, what we might call progressive revelation, the appearance of the revelations of God have a cyclical relationship with mankind. So that's another general principle. Here's another thing I wrote down myself. The sun is not dependent on the earth. Would you agree with that? If the earth disappeared, would the sun in any way, it wouldn't hurt the sun at all. But not the other way around, not vice versa. The earth is dependent on the sun. So this is the same relationship with God and man. God is not dependent on us, but we are dependent on God. Now, we have a very special relationship with the sun on the earth. In fact, we have such a, when I say a special relationship, are any familiar with the concept of the Drake's planet?
No.
You've never heard the concept of Drake's planet? Drake's planet, which is sometimes called the Goldilocks planet, okay, is a concept in modern cosmology which says that Earth is extremely unusual in the way in which it relates to its sun. And if it weren't for that unusualness, we would not have life on Earth. Do you understand what they're talking about? And they say basically, and I'll just give you some of the theories. Okay, if you were to go to a store and say, I want to buy a planet that has life, they'd say, well, it has to have these features. Number one, Earth is exactly the right distance in the galaxy. You know, our galaxy is 100 billion stars. If it was anywhere else, it wouldn't work. Secondly, it's exactly the right distance from the sun. If it was just a few, I can't even remember now, but if it was just a little bit further or a little closer, forget about it. Because if it was a little bit further, we wouldn't have liquid water. And if it was a little bit closer, we wouldn't have liquid water. Because either the water would be ice, or it would be steam. Evaporate. Or even worse, it wouldn't even be able to hold it in. And it's a very narrow range. I can't even remember. It's so narrow. It says it has to have the right amount of gravity. In other words, Earth has to be the right amount of gravity in relation to the sun. It says we have to have a moon. And no planets that we've ever found have a moon like we have. Because our moon is not really a true captured moon. I don't know if you know this, that a moon is something that flows around a planet and then the planet grabs it. And when the planet grabs the moon, it's because it has strong enough. But our moon is way too big. The Earth could never have grabbed the moon. The moon is actually another planet. Did you know that? But what happened is the planet came too close to Earth, collided with Earth. It had a name for it, I can't remember what it was called. And then it stayed there. And because of the moon, we have tides. And because of the moon, we have a certain wobble in our spin. I don't know if you understand. The wobble in our spin gives us the seasons of the year. And if we didn't have seasons, we couldn't have plants grow because they couldn't germinate and go. If we didn't have tides, they say that life couldn't evolve. Because life evolved by creatures being in an area where the water came in and out, so they could practice breathing in water, not in breathing water, until they could ultimately come out on land. Do you understand the principle of tides in the evolution of life and Darwinian evolution? Do you understand all of this? Is it clear? Anyway, the point is that they go over and over and over and over again, and they find that, they said that Earth would not be alive if it weren't for what they call good Jupiters. A good Jupiter means that you need to have very big planets in certain positions far away to deflect all of the other asteroids. And if not, you'll get bombarded. Have you ever seen a picture of Mars? It's just like crater after crater after crater after crater. Do you know how many things are going? But because of the Earth position in relation to Jupiter, like a, what do you call that? You know, everything comes near Jupiter, and Jupiter sends it away and protects us. So we get very few comets on Earth. We get less than a millionth of the comets that we should normally get. And so anyway, the point of the matter is that Drake, who was a scientist, said, we have to figure out how many planets in the known universe will likely have life. And so he decided to define planets as having life, as being Earth-like. So then they tried to look and see all the qualities that make Earth Earth. And then they tried to work out what is the odds of other planets having that. And they call those the Drake's planet. And they used to call that, and they still do call it a Goldilocks planet, because Goldilocks, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right, it's not too big, it's not too small. You understand? So you'll often look at that. And the more they talk about it, the more they realize that Earth is impossibly perfect in relation to its sun. It's almost as if there isn't any possible way that there could be another planet as perfectly situated in relation to its sun than Earth. So what does that mean about life on other planets? What do you think it means? I think it means that a planet doesn't have to be like Earth to have life. I think there can be alternate biology, which is another scientific theory which contradicts the search for Drake's planet. In other words, you don't have to have oxygen. You don't have to have hydrogen. You don't have to have heat. You don't have to have ice. You don't have to have flowing water. Life can impose itself in whatever form. That's my theory. But
they found like bacteria and things on Mars.
This is based on the concept they call extremophile. An extremophile means that so far they haven't found that life cannot live anywhere. Even on Earth, you can go to areas, like deep under the ocean or deep in caves. So there are two competing theories. One is that you have to have a planet that's very much like Earth, in which case you study how perfect Earth is. And the other one is that life can be any way. But all I'm trying to explain to you is this, is that we have a very wonderful relationship with our sun. Such a wonderful relationship with our sun. I'm talking about we, the Earth, or we, the people of the Earth. Such a relationship that all cultures and civilizations have worshipped the sun. Have you noticed that? If you look at the writings of all the ancient religions, or some of, like the Egyptians, they say they worship the sun. Do you know how they say the Egyptians worship the sun, or the sun god? Ra, R-A, which means the sun god. Well, I don't believe that they worship the sun. I'll make that very clear. I don't believe any culture ever worshipped the sun. I believe they worshipped God, but they realized the symbolic relationship. So they represented God by sun. Does that make sense? Maybe after 6,000 years or something like that, we dig up the hieroglyphics and we think they're worshiping the sun. No, they're worshiping God, but they understand that the sun-earth relationship is the same as the man-God relationship. Now, I want to read you something about God here. He says this. He says, "My love is my stronghold. He that entereth therein is safe and secure, and he that turneth away shall surely stray and perish." And we meditated upon this 3 weeks ago, isn't that right? In which, this is God speaking, he says his love is a stronghold. If you can stay within the stronghold of God, you will be safe and secure, and if you turn away, you will stray and perish. And basically what he's saying is this, is that if you can have the same relationship to God as the earth has to the sun, you are going to stay alive. So I wrote down all the things that you need to do with God. And I wrote it here. It says, things to do with God. Okay, that's what it says right here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 things to do with God. Okay, and so I want to see if we can do these 6 things. The first thing is, what do you think?
To know, to worship.
That's what it says. It says to know Him. The first thing is to know God. So if we could sing that song. How does that song go? So you're doing that key. To know Him is to love Him. What's the rest? Da 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 da. To know Him is to love Him, and I do, yes I do, yes I do. Isn't that? So that's a very good thing. To know Him it's a nice song. I'm going to find it and get it next week, and you could sing it. Okay, so to know Him is the first thing you have to do with God. You have to know God. Second is to love Him. Okay. So now what's the third thing? And I wrote this because I looked in all the religious scriptures and I found anytime it said to do something with God, I wrote that down.
To obey his teachings.
You know what? I didn't put that one down. But the next one I put down was to see him or to gaze on his beauty. To somehow to see him, to gaze. In other words, there's something about God that you have to look at, to gaze on. You have to somehow see God. You have to. Sometimes it says to see God with your own eyes, and he's talking about the spiritual ears. Jesus talks about opening your spiritual eyes. In other words, God is something you have to see, and you have the ability to see God. You have the ability to see God. And when I talk about see, I'm not talking about physical seeing. I'm talking about the fact that there is a spirit, a soul in you that has a sense of vision that can see God. And you need to learn to see God. How does one learn to see God? Well, I believe that you do it by reading the teachings of the messengers of God, studying their life, studying their character, studying their behavior. There is another way that you can see God. How is that?
You mentioned one time in one of your talks about, we are all mirrors.
Exactly. We see God in other people by seeing good. Good is God. So when I say to see God or to gaze on his beauty, I mean to see good. To see good in other people. Everybody has good qualities. Even people in this room have good qualities. I should have said that. It didn't come out right. Everybody in this room have good qualities. And if we enjoy them and we see them, that is another form of seeing God. Another passage I find, it says you need to find God. And this is a very interesting concept too. That God is somebody that you have to find. You have to search for, and you have to search high and low alike. In fact, in many religious scriptures, you find that they spend 20 or 30 years in the wilderness trying to find God. You read about the spiritual discipline, that God is someone that is not just in your face. He's not just someone that you just wake up and he's right there. That God is someone that must be sought. In the Bible, doesn't it say, seek and ye shall find? Ask, what is the exact phrase? Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened. Ask and it shall be given. In other words,